Everyone to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the advertising manager, and I get to be your host today. Today, we are sponsored by the Tapestry Weavers South. We are so excited to have them sponsor this episode. They are a wonderful group of people, and we're excited that they're here today and they're going to be our sponsors. If we're going to have questions, as always, at the end, and don't forget, if you would please, put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat. We love the chat. Keep that coming, but I can't always see the questions if they're over there, but I know I'll see them in the Q&A. So thank you for doing that. Today, we have Susan Iverson. Susan lives and weaves in rural Virginia near the small town of Montpelier. She had a long career as a professor in the crafts/material studies at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. She served 2 terms on the board of directors for the American Tapestry Alliance, and she was the president of it at one time. She has earned her MFA from Tyler School of Art at Temple University in Philadelphia. She has a BFA from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. Her work has been exhibited widely, and she is included in many collections, including the Art in the Embassy programs, which is a wonderful program. Capital One, the Avenir Museum, and the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. How's that for a feather in your cap? Her new book, Tapestry with Pulled Warp, Inspiration, Technique, and the Creative Process, has just been released, and we're going to talk some about that today also. Hey, Susan.
Hi, nice to see you.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good.
Thank you so much for being on here. We're excited to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, what is your favorite tea?
Okay, I have to admit I'm a serious coffee drinker, but in the summertime, it's an Arnold Palmer with just regular iced tea and lemonade is my favorite. And right now it's hot and humid in Virginia, so that's what I'm indulging in.
That's a good summer drink. Excellent
Sure.
summer drink.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to jump right in. This first image that we have, actually it's 2 images, is of your pulled warp technique, because that's what you're known for. And on the left, we have it in process. And then on the right is the finished product. So do you recall how you found this technique?
I do, and it's a good story. I was in
good.
graduate school, and so this is 100 years ago, or 1973, whichever. And I was at Tyler School of Art, as you mentioned, and we had a nice group of graduate students, including John McQueen, the really well-known basket maker, and working with Adela Akers. And she took us on this great field trip to New York. And part of the field trip was to go see this private collection of textiles. And we walked into this office building, and their entire art collection was textiles. And we were looking at someone, we came around a corner, and there was the Yellow Braid by Herman Schulten. That beautiful, any of you that know Herman Schulten's work, and a lot of you weavers should know his work. And it's in the book, Beyond Craft, the Art Fabric, which a lot of us from my generation anyway own that book and still use it all the time. It was a beautiful, huge piece where the tapestry curved. And the warps, you could see the warps curving, and it was magic, and it was big. It was like 6 by 8 feet and filled this whole hallway, which was just a normal height hallway. And we were all gasping and oohing and eyeing and how, why, and everything else. And we went back to our studios at school. And I don't remember exactly who used the term pulled warp first. I don't know who actually did the first sample. We were all working and talking about how that could be done, the many different ways, the what ifs of textiles. And that's such an important part of textiles, right? And so I know the first person that, at least in my memory, that wove a piece was John McQueen, and he wove a giant spiral using this technique of leaving openings in the warp like you see on the left side, and putting spacers in there, hold the warp open. And then when it comes off the loom, you pull those out the end of the weaving, and it and everyone went their own ways, and we were doing other serious work. But then I know Adela did a beautiful series of pulled warp pieces that had to do with the ocean. And about 5 years later, I did a series of X's and V's, and the V shapes used the pulled warp technique. And like any good technique, you set it aside, and it keeps coming back and revisiting my studio practice.
I think you're coming in and out, so I apologize if I just sit here. I never know if you're gone or not.
Oh, I'm sorry, my audio's going out.
Yeah, just briefly there, just briefly.
Okay.
If we have more problems, like I said, we'll just turn off the audio, I mean the video, and
Okay.
we'll go with audio. But it was just for a second there,
Sure.
but I just didn't
Okay.
know if you were done talking.
Yeah,
or
I was.
frozen. So it sounds, my next question, which you may have already answered, which was it like an aha moment for you, or was it more of a quiet discovery? I mean, did you just say, I'm going to do this forever? Or did you kind of like, oh, I'll try this, and then it kind of took over your life?
Yeah, no, I knew it was love at first sight, but I also knew that it was just a tool. And that at the time I just, figured out, knew how to do it and started doing samples. And I did a lot of samples. I knew at that point that I had no ideas where I needed to bend or fold or curve a tapestry. So I just kept thinking about it and loving it, but not using it for quite a while.
Now, were you a tapestry weaver when you started doing this?
I didn't, in undergraduate school, and I studied with Sherry Smith when she was in Colorado teaching. I did everything but tapestry then, and a lot of complex weaves, a lot of 16 harness weaves, trying to get things dimensional and trying to make them do different things. But it was the very end of my undergraduate where I did my first tapestry sample. And then I started doing flat tapestry when I was in graduate school.
Okay.
Yeah, with Adela.
You've done several series of different themes, and this one is called Fleeting. Now, I was curious, when you start doing a series, do you find that one series, I use the word begat, kind of takes you into the next series? Do you start working on it and go, oh, I know what I'm going to do next. I'll try this, and take off from there?
I have always worked in series. I draw, or at least I used to draw a lot. I still draw. I don't draw as much as I used to, but I get a lot of images in my sketchbook, and they all have to do with whatever I'm obsessed about. And I'm a very obsessive person. And so if some idea is stuck in my head, it stays stuck for a while, and I really work it out. So this piece is part of actually a larger series called Observation Light. It all has to do with that kind of memory we have of those really incredibly beautiful colors at dawn and dusk, when we get that array of colors that don't seem sky-like at all, but are, and we remember those in different ways. So the 14 panels in this are one piece. Currently, I may break the piece up later, just because no one has decided they can't live without all 14 at this time period. But right now it's one piece meant to be together. So it is a very large series. Yeah. And I was series until I start changing in my book a little bit. So I'm usually working ahead of myself in the sketchbook, and I usually stop a series when I still have a lot of ideas, but I feel like my obsession is shifting enough that I need to move on. And for the very first time right now, within the last 7 or 8 years, I've started working on 2 series at the same time. And that's I think that might come up later in our conversation.
Okay. Okay. Let's do this right now, Susan. Let's go ahead
Did
and
that answer enough of your question?
that was great. Let's turn your video off, if you don't mind. There you go. And let's see what happens, because we keep losing you and people are asking, what did she say? What did she say? So we may go back to some of the other questions that we were talking about. But right now I want to go on to this next one, which is called River Twins. And this is such a powerful series, and it focuses on you got a human figure in this series. And it's not normally what you do. You don't normally have people in your work. So what was the catalyst for the change for this?
Susan, I think you're muted.
Oh, there you go. I was wondering what happened.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
I swear I didn't hit that. I have a
No,
poltergeist
it's
in my
possessed.
computer.
It's possessed.
Okay, so I'd been working on this big series about Peru, and I really loved pre-Columbian textiles. I discovered them early in my career, and I did a very large series of those that had to do with the burial and a trip I took to Peru that changed my life and changed the way I thought about textiles. And it was the landscape and the textiles and especially the architecture of pre-Columbian Peru that really influenced me. And I think you can see some of that in this piece. But then these figures started to appear in my sketchbook. At the same time, I was working on these very abstract pieces about pre-Columbian Peru and their burial styles. And I was as perplexed as anyone because I'd been very involved as an undergraduate student with figure drawing and that, but I hadn't had a figure in my work for years and years and years. And all of a sudden these silhouettes started to appear in my sketchbook. And I thought, what's this about? And I started doing more sketches with them and placing them within the landscape. And so the landscape's in the figure and the figure's in the landscape. And so it has more to do with the idea of thinking than more of the idea of self than anything else. And these silhouettes appeared for quite a while in my work, but that's the best way I can explain it, which I don't think is 100% understandable, but that's the best I can do.
The colors are just combined with the shapes. They're really powerful, very
Thank you.
powerful.
And this also has to do with Richmond, because when I was teaching in Richmond and we'd moved right from the city to outside a little bit, I had to drive over the James River every day. So I drove over this large body of water that was dividing things. And that's where all the blue in this comes from.
Mm. Well, in this next series we're going to talk about, it's called Useless Dreams. You include the human figure again, and you have described these works as having a psychological, disturbing manner.
Yeah.
The colors, and again, it's those colors and those shapes that combine, and it's just a really strong effect. Would you talk some about this series?
Sure. So this is 6 pieces that can be seen separately or can be seen together as one piece, and I consider them part of my dream series, which again was very large, and some of them had, or most of them had the figure in it, and the figure was meant generally to be a sleeping figure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the backgrounds had to do with dreaming. And in the case of this piece, this is the only piece really, I think, in that series where I used pulled warp. So there's these 3 ridges where the head is. And what's disturbing is that they don't have a face, but they have these 3 ridges. And depending on how the light's hitting it, the ridges are either more pronounced or less pronounced. But whenever you put something besides a face on a head, it gets disturbing.
Mm.
And that, along with all of the symbols in the background, which I took from a fair amount of research I was doing about the symbols found universally in dreams from different cultures over different time periods. So this piece isn't really about my dreams. I was obsessed with dreaming at the time. I wanted my dreams to be meaningful. And so I'd wake up in the morning, and for most of us, our dreams are chaotic and stressful and turbulent and sometimes fun and sometimes interesting, but mostly disturbing. And I just wasted a whole bunch of my waking hours trying to make sense of my dreaming hours. But it was a good obsession as far as art making, because it was a continual font of information, visual and emotional information that I could put back into the work. And so each of these heads is about human size. So each of them is fairly big, I think 36 by 22 or something like that. And then the markings on them at the bottom is shorthand. And throughout my work from the very beginning, I was interested in the idea of different ways to communicate besides straightforward English, and mark making that means something, or you assume it means something. And I inherited my mother's shorthand book. And I had it in the studio. And one day I was flipping through it going, oh, wow. I remember her using shorthand, and she'd write notes to herself that she didn't want us to read. But it just became really interesting to me to see these different marks and how beautiful they were. And this piece was always going to be called Useless Dreams. And I looked up, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if in shorthand that actually was a nice shape? And so that means Useless Dreams, or very close to it. And I have had one person at an exhibition look at this and go, Useless Dreams? What are you talking about? So it was close enough that at least one person could read it.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day, that about shorthand. It was like, oh, wow, that was a blast from the past of
Oh,
same thing.
absolutely.
My mother did everything in shorthand, you know.
And you can't, most people can't read it. So, and it's okay with me. I just want people to think that, oh, it must mean something. And why is it repeated in each of these? A little bit different, because it is like script. So each time you write it, there's going to be a slight variation. It's not following warp by warp exactly, but it is doing something, and almost like a large signature across the bottom.
When you were making these, I don't know how many looms you have, but did you do one, finish it, and then move on, or were you able to work on them simultaneously?
Oh, no, I have two looms, but I did them all at the same loom, on the same loom, one after another. And I would take one off and start doing the finishing work while I started weaving the next one. So they were all drawn out pretty much at one time. I may have done a little finagling right before I started each one. And whenever I work with a piece like this, where I want to see more than one at the same time, I will put all the drawings on the wall. And it's interesting when I'm doing drawings for these, and I think everyone works very differently, but I work just in black and white in my sketchbook, just graphite. So they're small thumbnail sketches that just have the outlines of the shapes. Then I take a paper as large as the cartoon needs to be, and I usually keep my sketchbook on one side of my studio and work on a drawing wall on the other side of my studio. So I'm not tracing it out of my sketchbook. I'm not trying to follow it exactly, because the size is changing so much, and I want to respect that change in size. And I will draw out the cartoon, basically the outlines of the shape, the composition, and look at it, get the composition set really exactly the way I want it. And then I will go to my yarn stock and start pulling out balls of yarn, and just pinning them to the wall where I expect the colors to go. So it's never made sense to me to do let's say a small painting or a photoshopped image of these and try different colors. The color is pretty intuitive, and it comes pretty spontaneously to me. But then when I'd finish weaving one and start doing the pulling, and then all the slits have to be sewn, all the ends have to be cut, the hems have to be put in, the Velcro put in. That's a long process. And I find most of that, the pulling part is very exciting. Everything else is very boring to me, but necessary to be done. So if I had to do just that, I'd go a little crazy. So it's always good to have something to weave at the same time, and just bounce back and forth between the two.
Yeah, you can go back and forth.
Keeps me fresher. Yeah.
There you go. Well, this next series is called The Color of No. And you said in doing this, you were investigating the meaning of color of language. Can you talk more about that? And what exactly did you want to learn in doing this series?
Yeah. So this came out of not so much wanting to learn, but wanting to teach. I taught for 40 years, and I taught art foundation classes, not all the time, but all of my early years, and then quite a bit, at least into my middle years of teaching, and then only occasionally in my latter days of teaching. But color theory was part of the class I taught. And I had a good color theory background when I was at Tyler School of Art. But every year I kept reading more about different color theory, and especially about color and content. And after all those years of teaching and talking to so many students, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, about color in textiles, a lot of people are afraid of color, and I have never been afraid of color. I think color is our friend, and it's so powerful. It needs to be used, but it needs to be used with some thought, both about our intent and about how color is perceived within our culture.
Mhm.
Maybe within a worldwide culture, but also at least specifically in ours, because colors do mean different things within different cultures. So on this, I've been thinking about this project and I considered it a project almost more than a series because it was more analytical. And the original ones I did were only like 3 by 3 inches. And I thought, I'll weave like 40 of these and it'll be a small, like salon style hanging on the wall. Just all over the wall, there'll be these little no's. And I wove a bunch of them and I put them on the wall and I thought, oh, this is terrible. It did nothing. It just sat there. These little no's had no volume. So I put it away, but I kept thinking about it. And then when I was closing in on, I guess it was my last year of teaching, and there were some things going on in my life where my studio time was getting really limited, and it was getting harder for me to see time when I was going to be able to do a really large piece. I thought, I'm going to resurrect that idea of the nose. Part of the idea was to be spontaneous, to think about font and size and color in the moment and then weave it. So the challenge to myself was to go into the studio in the morning, do a drawing of the word no in a font or script, and kind of talk to myself about what I was feeling at that day, and pull colors from, again, I always have a big supply of yarn that's hand dyed and of silk and wool, and then just go with whatever I was feeling and make the decision. And then it would take me several days well, this one I think is like 22 by 30, somewhere in that size range. So it's a little bit larger. Wow. Some of them were as small as, say, 10 by 20 inches or 10 by 30 inches. So I could weave it pretty quickly because this is not hard weaving. This is not, it's.
Well, I don't know about that. That's a relative term.
The hard part of this project was coming up with the word no, because I needed a word that didn't conjure up an image, because I wanted the pieces to be shown together in a large group. And there are over 50 of these tapestries now. And so it can fill a very large gallery. And I wanted there to be conversations between the tapestries and between the people looking at the tapestries to see what kind of content they would get out of the word no, which doesn't have an image to go with it, and the colors that were with the word, or in this case, the repetition of the word. And so I've had 4 or 5 big showings of these tapestries, and each one has been very different, because the tapestries, since they can be hung in so many different ways, in so many different combinations, you get all kinds of different conversations. And I'm just hoping that people look at them and think more about color. It really was my goal. That's why I called it a project.
Well, you were inspired by your experiences in Peru. You mentioned that earlier, right? Also. And it was in the 70s, right? 1970s when you went to Peru?
It was in the late 70s, and I'd very fortunately gotten a National Endowment for the Arts grant.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
Which back then they gave to individual artists. It was a wonderful program because it changed the lives of so many artists. I'd wanted to go to Peru, but at a an entry-level teaching position. It was a tenure track job, but I was never going to, for years and years, was never going to get enough money to actually travel to Peru. So that grant gave me the money to spend 3 weeks in Peru. Now, I stayed at the cheapest hotels in Peru and ate the cheapest food I could find, but it still was a life-changing trip where I got to really go to the museums and look at the textiles and travel all over the country by train and bus. And it was just a life-changing event. It was a hard trip because I thought they all spoke Spanish. I hadn't heard about Quechua. So I was speaking my high school Spanish to people who didn't speak Spanish. So it was a difficult trip, but visually it just really was exactly what I needed. And it just affected my work. And it's still, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't see something in my head that's pre-Columbian.
Mm.
And of course, I looked at Peru and the landscape and the architecture and the textiles through an artist's eyes. I wasn't looking at them through the eyes of an art historian or anything. So I could make up my own history, and since they didn't have a written language, I can also just make my own history. So I have this fantasized version of happy weavers. I mean, we do know that their culture valued textiles, at least at one point in time, more than anything else, more than gold, more than anything. And so much energy from the culture was being put into these incredible textiles. And I have yet to meet a weaver who doesn't love pre-Columbian Peruvian textiles or ancient Peruvian textiles.
Now, is this one piece or is this 6?
This is one piece.
Okay.
And it's 2 panels. And I was weaving a lot of my tapestries at that point. I had a large loom and I had access to even bigger ones at the university. But I chose to work in panels because I've always really liked the object quality of tapestry, the heftiness of the fabric, the kind of juiciness of the fabric. And I wanted, the way I was breaking apart the composition, it made sense to me to have overlapping panels, sometimes 2, but more often 3 or 4 panels that would cast a physical shadow.
Oh, okay.
And so that shadow that's running right across the center is an integral part to the whole piece. And it's subtle, but it's still there and was important to me. And I was also I was only weaving at that point in time at 5 warp ends per inch with a very heavy rug wool. So this piece, I think, is 5 by 6 feet, somewhere in that range, or 6 by 7 feet. And so they were big, and I generally hung them fairly low on the wall so you could feel like you were walking into them. You're like entering this new world that was filled with these geometric patterns and the sense of space and the kind of dry desert sense that I had in Peru. Also, I was visiting Peru in our summer and their winter. And so it was a very dry, brown, arid space when I was there.
Well, this next image is I saw it in your book. I was looking through your book, and it's called The Pond. And I just thought how it was just a wonderful example of the pulled warp and how it really enhances the image. And I just thought, I want to be there in person. I want to peek inside and see what's in there, what's inside that little opening. And these are only like 13 inches by 13 inches, right?
Right.
So what was the goal with this work?
So this was part of a big series called Observations, and we'd moved to the country. This was in 2000. We moved to the country in 2007. We got 10 acres of land on a pond. And, I'd lived in urban areas my whole life. I'd always wanted to live in the country, but it was a huge shock to move to the country. In our house during the summertime, we can't see another dwelling. We're not that far from other houses, but because of the forest around us, we can't see other houses. So you feel very, not isolated, but you feel kind of protected by Mother Nature, except when she is encroaching too much, and then you feel maybe a little threatened by Mother Nature. But anyway, so these tapestries are supposed to be like little vignettes of my walking through the woods. I had a daily walk, kind of a therapy walk, through a path down to the pond and back through the woods up to the house. And just thinking about the different ways of looking. Also, some of them look like they're bird's eye views. And that's because my studio at that point in time was on the 3rd floor of the house. And I did have a bird's eye view of the pond and of Mother Nature, and it looked very different. And then combining that bird's eye view from my studio to my walks that were very close to the pond and the earth and the path, looking at things from different vantage points, it seemed to make sense to put them in these little, not cages, because it's more like an opening where you should peek in. You should be a little voyeur about them. And years before that, in an early series called Horizons that was done back in the 90s, I had tried this same shape, huge. It was, huge compared to these, where the piece was, I think, 20 inches tall and about 5 or 6 feet wide. And there was one very large opening. And it held its shape for quite a few years, but then gravity started taking hold. And what you see is those nice curves there started to sag down. So I knew that was maybe an interesting result of time, but not something I wanted to happen necessarily to anything. So I wanted to try this smaller scale to see if they would indeed keep their shape through years and years and years, and they have. There's not enough weight there, so they very nicely hold up with that beautiful symmetrical curve. I could push them down into a sagging shape. That's one of the beautiful things about pulled warp, is you can make something that looks very geometric and rigid become very organic just by a little manipulation. But once you manipulate a textile too often, even though these have a linen warp, which has all that body to it, then you do lose the ability to be pushed back into the geometric form. And so this was a one piece. It was started out as one piece. I have broken this up so that I'm selling them individually now. So one of these has gone away. I still have 3 of them.
I never thought about the manipulation. It's true. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very tactile and involved process that you have with.
Absolutely. It's just like, as far as I can see, that's why I keep loving Peru. I keep loving tapestry. I keep loving pulled warp. And it's all because of the versatility and the wealth of information in all of those things that just constantly intrigue me and keep me engaged. Because frankly, I've been weaving tapestry for a very, very, very long time now. And I still have more things to weave.
Well, the neat thing about what happened was I looked at the book and I saw pond, and then I turned the page, and then there was Verdant. And this one is like 4 feet by 7 feet, right?
Right. It's big.
Big
And
difference. You know?
This was the major part of the observation series, was really about the walking along the paths through the woods, walking in general, passing through landscape in general. And so these were made of all these long, thin strips. And this piece came to me just in a snap. There was a call for entries for a show that was going to be at the Textile Museum in DC called The Color of Green. And I read that passage, and this is probably after I just come in from a walk and had opened my computer and was looking at email and saw that. And this piece just fully formed, popped into my head. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a perfect piece to weave and enter into this thing. Well, they took one of my pieces, but they did not take this. I think it was just too green because it is relentlessly green. And it also includes glass. And it was the first time I'd included a different material that was an integral part of a tapestry. And so these glass orbs at the bottom, I worked with one of the graduate students at VCU, and they very kindly blew all these different orbs. And there's nothing holding them in the bottom, except they just sit there very politely. So, and this piece has been shown, I bet it's been in at least 20 galleries. It was in a traveling show that went around for 2 or 3 years. And every gallery person or director or owner has a panic attack when you say, just hang them on the wall and carefully set the glass in the bottom, and it'll be just fine. And it just, people see the glass and they take a step back usually. And they've been perfectly fine. I haven't lost any glass. Although I have some spares, always have spares.
It's
in
good.
Glass, yes.
I just love it because I find myself cupping my hands like,
yeah.
Oh, it's just being held there, like a little nest or something.
Yeah. Well, it's like a dewdrop that's just slid down the grass. Yeah.
I love that. That's just lovely. Just lovely.
And again, this should hang close to the floor, not high up. It's best if you can kind of look the cupping and the glass should be like maybe 6 or 7 inches off the floor to be at its best advantage for what I'm envisioning the piece to be.
Oh, okay. Well, when you're designing something large like this, do you have to do like a big mind shift when you want to go back to small and vice versa?
I have to do a big mind shift when I go to small. Small is not my norm. So, and if I do something small, it usually is in a grouping of small things that make a larger thing. So I think on human scale. So, at least body size. most of the time. Although when I switched to pulled warp and switched to silk and linen for a lot of my things, I had to scale things down a bit just because of the time involvement and what pulled warp will actually do. But when I was working with wool, things were pretty much large, not huge. I mean, there's people that have done monumental tapestries. I think the biggest thing I ever did was maybe 8 by 14. And that would have been the very largest piece I ever did, maybe 8 by 16, somewhere in that range. But that would have been the very largest. So big is not hard. And I actually, like, every once in a while, I'm invited to a very small format show, like a 3 by 3 or 5 by 5 inch show. And I find those a real challenge, but I always have to weave at least 3 things before I get one that I think makes any sense to be that size. So small to me is hard.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to talk about your book. Everybody's asking about it. So it's called Tapestry with Pulled Warp, and it was just published like earlier this year, right?
It just got released in February.
Yeah, yeah. So why did you decide to write a book?
Okay, because no one else did. I kept waiting. I never wanted to write a book. People have been asking me for a book since I first started doing workshops years and years ago. And I just said, I'm not a writer. I can teach and I can weave, but I'm not a writer. And, I can put a sentence together, but that's about it. I wish I was a writer. I wish a creative writer. I think that would be, being an author of a novel would be my dream job, but that's not, I'm not a storyteller. So, but people kept asking, and in this wonderful group of retired textile teachers from the Southeast. The group CFIA is still a group of of people that are teaching textiles in the Southeast now, but a bunch of us retired a few years ago, and during COVID, we all got together again on a Zoom. And that includes people like Tommy Scanlon and Susan Brandeis and Catherine Ellis. And some other people who are wonderful people, Edwina Bringle, but haven't written books. But there were, 3 other people in there that have written books and kept saying, well, Susan, you should write a book about pulled warp. Who's going to do it? I keep saying, someone will do it. But COVID, COVID was COVID, and it changed the way we look at things. And it changed the way I looked at things. And I finally thought, well, I'm getting frustrated with the world. Maybe it's time, and I'm getting older. I'll admit that was a part of it too. If no one else is going to write the book, then I guess I have to. So they had worked with Schiffer Publishing, and they all had good recommendations for it as Schiffer as a publisher, and the editing being really good and wonderful people to work with. So I put together a proposal in 2022 and sent it in, and then in early 2024, the book is all done. It was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Really?
But thank goodness for like the iPhone camera. I have to give a shout out to that, because I wanted it to be a book with a lot of images. It's meant to replace me. It's meant to replace my workshops. So there's enough photos in the book of me doing the process that by reading the words and looking at the pictures, or like a lot of people do, just look at the pictures, you can figure out the process. And then the editors talked to me about that it really needed a chapter that was just about my work too, and when I use it and when I don't use it and why, because I've used it off and on for so many years. So that's at the end of the book. And that was interesting to write, to really made me really think more about why I'd used it and when I'd used it. And I found out I'd used it a lot more than I thought I had. So it was a good experience for me. Looking back on a long career, it's like I'm always engaged with what I'm doing at the given moment. I'm not looking back at what I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, except when I'm doing talks like this. So it really was beneficial to me as an artist to look at my work kind of in a different perspective like that. So I'm glad I did it. I'm glad it's done, and I hope it is helpful to people.
Well, I have the book, and I said this to you earlier. It's like, I tell people, even if you don't want to learn how to do pulled warp, the images in it are just amazing. They're just gorgeous.
Thank you so much.
It's a combination coffee table book and how to. And we're very excited because our friends at Schiffer have said that they will give 20% off to anybody who wants to buy the book. You'll need to buy it through Schiffer, and we are going to post the code in the chat. It is the words Textiles and Tea 20. So when you go to Schiffer and buy it, put that in there, and then you'll get 20% off. And it's only good until June the 22nd. So you got to kind of jump on this. But thank you, Schiffer. We love Schiffer. They
Yes, they're
publish
great.
great books. So thank you for doing that.
That's very nice of them. And I also just think they were just a great group to work with. So if you have people in your audience that are really seriously thinking about writing a book, there's so many publishers out there, but I would always recommend talking to them if you're wanting to do a book that does deal with textiles. Their recent textile books, I think, have all been just spectacular.
And just to let you know, if you are thinking about a book, like you have an idea for a book and you're going to be at Convergence, Schiffer will be there. And it's a great time to talk to them. And then they're going to do a panel on how do you get a book published. So when you're sitting around with your friends like Susan did, and they all look at you and go, hey, you should publish a book. I liked how they kind of threw you under the bus there, Susan. Yeah, Susan, you go ahead and publish a book. We'll watch.
They did. And then I certainly harassed them over the next, well, the whole time I was writing the book saying, listen, guys, this is much harder than I ever thought. But it was interesting. I learned so much, and I only wish I had something else to write a book about, because now I know how to do it. But I'm one and done on a book.
Well, that was my next question for you. What did you learn about yourself or your artwork? I mean, there's so many samples in this book. Did you ever get to the point where you're like, I don't want to do another sample. I can't do it.
Yeah, well, I had to weave all new samples for the book. And, I had all these samples that I'd done over, the last 45, 50 years. And I thought, well, I can use some of those. But frankly, I'm one of those people that does samples just at the last minute and then I use a demonstration in the class, and they're never beautiful samples. And I thought, oh, I have all these samples, but they're pretty ugly. That's one thing I learned. And so I had to think more about the different colors that I was using, how they would show up in a book, how they'd be easy to see or easier to read. So I did learn that about me, and I learned that I can learn a new trick. I think the best thing about being an artist is that you never retire. So if I can write a first book at my age, which is not 112, but it's up there, and can learn new things and can be open to new things, then that's it's a great way to live, so it was like a life lesson, which was pretty spectacular in itself.
What's next for you? I know it's not writing a new book. I always ask people to write another book. I won't ask you that. But what is next for you?
Well, I'm doing something that I did with the Color of No and the Observation Light series. Is I was weaving those two at the same time. And what I'm doing is I'm continuing with the Observation Light series, and I've started another series that's just called Conversations. And when I had the video on earlier, straight behind me, there was
actually, why don't you turn your camera back on? Let's try it again. People are saying they want to see you. So let's try it again.
Okay. So I'll kind of move my head. So the two pieces that have that are, let's see.
Right over your shoulder?
Yeah, right over my shoulder there. They are from the conversation pieces. And on one side is a symbol, and on the other side is an image. So it's meant to be a conversation between a symbol that we recognize, maybe not, but at least it should be slightly familiar or have some reference point for that. And then another image that is abstract or abstracted, maybe not completely abstract. And they're meant to be quiet pieces. And I think during COVID, the other pieces on either side of that are done during COVID, but those are kind of the saner pieces I did over COVID. A couple of the pieces I did over COVID got frenetic, crazy. And I decided I needed to just quiet things down a little bit. I wanted them to be more contemplative, very livable. So a scale and a size that's livable, and an information that's very livable, but also engaging, where you want to think about it. You can keep looking at it. I hope That's my goal. And it's a big goal.
Well, thank you for sharing with us about that. I can't wait to see it on display somewhere
I hope.
in the
Yes.
gallery.
And
Well,
also just a shameless plug is a big show is opening this next weekend at Chautauqua in New York at the Chautauqua
okay.
Institute Gallery. And it's a group show called Holding Space, curated by Erica Diamond. And I have 9 tapestries in that show.
Wow.
So they're all from the Observation Light series. So if anyone's in the New York area, Western New York, the show's going to be up, I think, for a full month, and it would be good to see if you're interested. Yeah.
How could we not be? How could we not be? Well, Susan, I think you're going to get an award for the most questions I've ever had in a session. That's the good news. The bad news, we got too many questions, so I apologize ahead of time. Some of these you've answered along the way, so we're good. But this is a great question. People want to know, do you work from side to side or up and down on your designs when you weave?
Well, when they're the designs, I work at them the way I would see them. When they're
Okay.
on the loom, they're usually sideways. Yeah.
Okay.
And front side up.
Okay.
So a lot of tapestry weavers weave from the back. I weave from the front.
Okay. All right. They want to know what kind of warp yarns and what kind of weft yarns do you prefer?
Okay. I use an 8/4 linen that I dye, kind of a medium to light gray. Working on regular colored linen for most tapestries, to me, is like working on a plain white canvas. You need to get it a little dirty first. And then I use most of my wools and my silks are from Henry's Attic. And I use Crown Colony. I think it's 2-ply for the wool for most of these. Although I also have a New Zealand yarn from Webb's, I think, that I use for some. And then the silk is a 4/2 silk, also from Henry's Attic. And then I also include some other things, some linens, and occasionally a little bit of embroidery floss.
Embroidery floss. Oh,
Yeah, well, just a little bit.
people are talking about how amazing your work is.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Liz Adams says, I was just thinking that looks like shorthand. And then you said, yes, that's it. You may have answered this, but I'm going to ask it again anyway. In your dream series, did you put on one long warp for all 6 pieces, or did you change warp every time?
You know, I did not change the warp every time. I'm known for putting on 5, 6, or 7 yards of warp at a time. I like to get at least 2 tapestries off of any warp. And for those, I probably wove those 3 on 2 different warps with 3 on each one. And when you're weaving with the pulled warp, and since you pull warp, the warp has to be longer. So your tapestry stretches out when it's being woven in some cases. And for the people that have the book, look up the piece Twilight in that, and you can see that a piece that's only 30 inches tall when it's done was 8 feet long when it came off the loom. Yeah, so there is a difference with pulled warp pieces.
Have you worked with and met Peruvian artists when you went down there?
No, I didn't. And I was so busy looking at the past, I wasn't looking at the present. So I did not do that. And a lot of people ask me if I want to go back to Peru, and the answer is both yes and no. I think I've got so many amazing memories. You know how memories get altered and changed, and I'm still thriving on those memories from 40 some years ago now. And I'm afraid if I go back to Peru, I'll change my viewpoint in some way. And also, I know that traveling in Peru is not as easy as like, traveling in the States. So although I could afford a better trip this time, so I could actually stay in a really nice hotel, Maybe I'll go back someday, but
Yeah, it is kind of, yeah, maybe, maybe not, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Well, this is from April Price. She says, "Hi, Susan. I was in your
Hi.
2018 Penland class. It was fabulous. Would you ever consider teaching another class there?"
You know, the Penland class took the starch out of me.
Really?
So
April,
it was
what did you do?
wonderful. No, it really, uh, yes and no on that. But I don't think I don't think I probably will. But I would love to think about the idea, but I don't think I would do another class there unless it was like a week-long class.
Mm.
It's the 7 hours of getting there um and the long days, which I mean, the first time I taught at Penland, I was like 27 or something, and it was easy peasy. But in my 70s now, that it just makes it harder. And I'm not whining, well, maybe a little bit of whining, but it's just I only have so much energy for some things. And so now I've written the book, I don't need to teach anymore, right?
No, that's not right. Well, this is from Michaela McIntosh. Hi, Michaela. She says, "Susan, you're the only tapestry artist I know of that does what you do. I had you for a class at Tampa Convergence. Your descriptions are so beautifully told. Just can't wait to see the book." Michaela, don't forget, get that code and you can get a discount, you know?
That's very sweet. Thank you.
Some of these have just been answered. Oh, somebody wanted to know the significance of the Greek keys, which she saw woven into one of the pieces. Were there Greek keys?
Um,
I missed that. So
they weren't meant they weren't meant to be Greeks. The Greeks don't show up in my work, but you know, there's so many
say yes.
shapes.
Just say yes.
Yes, deep thoughts.
Sorry, Paula.
There's so many shapes, that cross cultures. So I like the fact that when you're working abstractly like I do, that everyone brings their own knowledge to the work. I'm bringing my knowledge, but you're bringing yours.
Mm.
And I think that that's just fine. So I never expect people to get out of my work exactly what I'm putting into my exact meaning. And frankly, I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I'm letting my subconscious do a lot of the decision making here. And I believe in my subconscious. It's my best friend some days. But I do expect other people to bring all of their knowledge and all of their loves of the art world and what they know about the art world and art history to the work as well. And they should see different things like that. So I'm pleased, but I don't know.
Well, Susan, I cannot believe it, but we have to stop for today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
This was great fun, and I want to thank HGA, and I also want to thank Tapestry Weavers South for supporting this broadcast. And all of the people who are watching, thank you so much, whether you buy my book or not. Enjoy tapestries. I just love to talk about tapestry.
Yeah, you have to. It is beautiful. And kudos to Schiffer. They do a nice book. They really do a nice book. And we do appreciate them doing the 20% off. It was really nice of them. I appreciate them doing that. Susan, you take care. Thank you so much for being on here today. We really enjoyed meeting you and getting to see your work. Go to our website and see more. SusanIversonArt.com. There's so much more there to see. And those of you who didn't get your questions answered, I'm sorry. Maybe you can email her and she'll tell you, or you can talk her into doing a class. That's what we're trying to get her to do. So thank you so much. I do want to say thank you to Tapestry Weavers South. I have to say some of my buds are in that group, and we do appreciate what you do. They are full of some really good tapestry weavers too. So they wanted to support one of their own, and thank you so much for doing that. We appreciate it. If you want to do a sponsorship, like a group of you want to get together, your guild, your business, go on to our website at weavespindye.org, and there's a place there that you can purchase a sponsorship. Or you can call me and we'll work out when you want to do your sponsorship, but we appreciate you helping this program continue. A call out to our spinners. Hey, You know, they keep saying the Convergence doesn't have enough for the spinners. All right, spinners, time for you to step up. We have a skein competition, and it will be up during Convergence. And it's easy to get into because you can either ship it, but you have to get it to us in Atlanta by July 5th. This is one of the few things that we actually take into the office. So ship it to Atlanta on July 5th, or you can bring it. That's a nice thing about a skein. You can put it in your suitcase and just bring it. But we would love to see some of the work of our spinners and what they're doing there. It will be different prizes. We have 5 different categories. There's novelty yarn, you can do combinations. There's non-animal fiber. There's singles and multiples, and there's prizes. So be sure you jump in there and submit your spinning for this wonderful competition and display. I think it's important that we show the world what spinners do. It's only $3 if you're an HGA member, and it's $5 if you're not an HGA member. And again, just a reminder, you can send it to us or you can bring it, but we need you to submit the paperwork. So go online to weavespindye.org and submit your entry for the skein competition. And we are looking forward to seeing that at Convergence. Tomorrow, speaking of which, is the last day you can sign up for a workshop. And we close that out a little bit earlier because the teachers need to get ready. You know, they need to have enough supplies. They need to know how many people are going to be there. So Wednesday, June 19th, tomorrow is the last day that you can sign up for a 1-day, 2-day, or 3-day workshops. We've had people calling today, trying to get in at the last minute, and there's still openings for some of the workshops. So go online. The workshops are listed on the website, and it will show if it's open or not, and you can decide which one you want to get in, and then you can go online and sign up for it. You can still sign up from now until Convergence opens for the 3-hour and the 90-minute classes. Those are a little bit easier to jump into at the last minute. Just a reminder, though, you do need to be a member to participate in any of those. We want to thank all of our people who have helped support HGA. Your donations to HGA and your membership helps these programs, especially your donations. That's what keeps Textiles and Tea going, Careers in Textiles, Spinning and Weaving Week. Believe it or not, we're working hard on that already. So thank you so much for donating. We appreciate it, and we appreciate your membership. If you missed an episode, you can always watch it on Facebook, HGA Facebook page, or you can watch it on YouTube. And if you want to watch it on YouTube, you might want to subscribe, because if you do, then you'll get a notice when a new one's been uploaded. We try to get these done within a couple of weeks, but it takes a while to get those to upload. So check it out, bring a buddy. If you want to watch one again, please do. I know a lot of people tell me, oh, I just can't watch it at 4 o'clock. That's why we have them recorded. You can watch them whenever you want to. Next week, we have Sam Goetz. We are excited. She's all the way over across the pond, and she's going to join us. She has an interesting equipment that she weaves on, and an interesting approach to being a professional weaver. I encourage you to check it out. Hope you all have a wonderful week. We will see you next week, and happy tea.